It turns out Elon didn't care about that at all. What he cares about is making a lot of money, and he saw an opportunity, and he certainly, with his skill set, because he's not actually a genius. It turns out he's closer to an idiot in my mind.
Ross, Elon Musk is fast becoming the most important political figure in this country in slightly unusual fashion to many observers. What's going on with him, do you think? Why is he becoming interested in the UK? What's his game, do you think?
I think this is kind of another move into a more disturbing area, that Elon's preoccupation with power in the United States has now spread globally. So I think he feels it's his, way of saving the world from this. Really, I think a lot of it's driven by immigration. It's a very xenophobic viewpoint that I don't share, especially from somebody who actually was an immigrant to many countries himself. So why isn't Elon in South Africa? Because he certainly doesn't want anybody else coming anywhere else. So it seems like he feels like he can force his policies upon anybody. And then even the people who agree with them, if they, God forbid, disagree with anything he says, then he tries to replace them. So he's trying to make changes in the world that he sees as a benefit to the world. But, we're all different democracies that have systems that have lasted a lot longer and before Elon was ever born. And nor did he even come from these systems. He came from apartheid. So I think the world should be troubled by the fact that the richest man in the world now can just throw his money around and change democracies all around the world. Is a testament to the failure of democracies from protecting themselves from the enormous power that people have been able to amass financially.
I mean, is it almost a messiah complex? I mean, does he think? I mean, because he's got a lot of success off his own bat. A genius of sorts with what he's done with his with his world of technology. And does that give him sort of confidence, false confidence, this belief that therefore he's a gift to humanity in other areas?
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen this with many leaders throughout history who have ended poorly, is that they have this heightened belief system that their sensibilities are what's best for everybody because they've been successful in certain areas of life or in politics in certain ways. They then sort of extrapolate out that everything they believe is somehow good for humanity and should be employed. And many of those people were severely demented, whether it be, like communism under Mao or obviously fascism under Hitler and Mussolini. I find the Italian, move right also quite ironic with Elon. So the move right that we're seeing in the world is not a good thing, and this is my opinion. And countries like America, which are founded on immigration, are very different than countries like England with very different politics. So I don't like diving into the politics of each country. But the fact that an American immigrant is now, how would I say, messing with politics because they have so much money, because that's the only reason he has power, is because he had enough money to buy a social media platform and then convert it into his platform and then leverage his money and social media power to influence the world in his likeness.
And is that why he bought Twitter? Because he tried to get out of buying Twitter at one point. He clearly bought it at too high a price. The value of it looks like it's tanked as a purely business venture. And it's an interesting question of whether, as a vehicle of influence, is it as important as all that? I mean, maybe it is, because he gets credit for Trump, doesn't he? So does he have the power to affect democracies in other countries?
Well, yeah. I mean, he certainly does, and he did here. I don't think Trump would have won if it weren't for Elon. So, owning a social media platform, which was sort of what Trump was trying to do with True Social, and then changing it, so he didn't actually solve any of the problems of Twitter, and he, I think, was really backing out now in hindsight because he realized he might not be able to control Twitter. But it turned out that he was able to control Twitter and now change and manipulate it into his likeness, which is sort of killed the platform. So, the truth is Twitter has lost its power, and now there isn't really this global news source that used to exist that was sort of a somewhat unbiased and quite free flowing. Now that doesn't exist. There's nothing on Twitter of value anymore. So it's a completely manipulated site. And so in my mind, no, see, when I was working with Elon 10 years ago, investing in Tesla and trying to save climate, which is actually the thing I still care about, which
Yeah.
is trying to solve climate, um, it was sort of like the local media, national media cared about Elon, the business media cared about Elon. But when he bought Twitter, that's when the BBC started calling. That's when, everybody from India started calling me. All these people started calling me from all over the world. And I said, why do you care now? And it was because of Twitter, because Twitter's more powerful in other places in the world than the United States, because the United States has multiple social media platforms that people use for information. And in other places of the world, especially with less flowing information, they've used social media as their main source of communication, sites like Twitter. And so it leveraged his wealth in a way that I don't think he realized would give him this much power.
Yeah.
And now that he realized he had this power and he's used it successfully, now he's like, I'm gonna go to every country I don't like what they're doing, and I'm just gonna change their governments now too.
You mentioned climate change, which I think is so interesting about this, because his fellow travellers now, if we think he's a right-wing figure, and he supports AFD
Yes.
in Germany, he supports Nigel Farage and reform,
Right.
well, not Nigel Farage anymore, but reform in Britain, Trump, he's a right-wing figure. These right-wing characters tend not to care about net zero. He made his money from electric cars. He presumably became powerful because of being part of a movement to find clean ways of producing power. How does that work as a right-wing figure now who made his money off a net zero product?
It's funny because I was at the beach like 2 days ago, because I'm in California and it's still sunny and nice despite the middle of winter. And, I was just thinking about how beautiful and how lucky we are to live in California. And the fact that Tesla is now a painful thing for me, because it's still important for me to see them be successful and sell electric cars. Like, to me, we've won. Like, EV sales are great. There's not, you can't stop it. Countries around the world have moved to sustainable transportation, but it turns out Elon didn't care about that at all. What he cares about is making a lot of money, and he saw an opportunity, and he certainly, with his skill set, because he's not actually a genius. It turns out he's closer to an idiot in my mind, but like, he's a genius in manufacturing. He's a genius in technology, but he's not a genius at all when it comes to any other area of life. And so I think the fact of the matter is that he knew he could exploit technologies like rocket science and in this case battery technology to make a lot of money, and use the United States government's desire to be in these industries to get government funding to support this vision, because his whole vision was supported by the US government. And so he succeeded in this, and I don't take anything away from how difficult those successes were, and I've been a huge beneficiary of those successes financially. But as a climate guy, there's no question in my mind that all the policies he's pushing today are bad for the environment, including in England, and the party that he's supporting now is anti-climate as well. And so right now, he's the biggest risk to climate is actually become Elon.
Which is amazing, because if you think about it, he made his money probably by immigrant workforces and caring about climate change. And his politics now are anti-widespread immigration, and
it's
with
crazy,
people who are anti-net zero.
It's crazy. You go to Tesla, half these guys are from India. Okay. Just look at the senior management team. They're all immigrants. Okay. So when you, like my company, my personal company, we have so many immigrants in my company. My partner is from Brazil. Several of my partners, one's from Israel, one's from Tunisia and France. America, what made us great is immigration. Now, I don't think we should have open borders. They just take these things and make everything so extreme.
Yeah.
Okay. But immigration is one of the reasons the United States is the greatest economy in the world. And it's the actual reason that the U.S. economy has grown faster than any country in the world over the last 4 years, despite whether or not you like what Biden did by letting in tons of immigrants. It helps the economy. We need labor here in the United States. I just don't get it. So in countries like England and Europe, and I don't want to wade into your politics because it's in a way worse than ours, but immigration is an issue in Europe, and it's one that needs to be addressed one way or another, because the policies have been very liberal. But but there's something in the middle, and everything seems to be like, if we don't like this, it's got to be the other extreme. And I think the problem is we don't have sensibility. We have two extremist groups, leftists and rightists now, running governments, trying to make all of us in the middle happy, and none of us are.
It's a great point. There's a great column in the Sunday Times today by a guy called Matthew Side over here. He talks about sort of how we're kind of algorithmically crippled. You have a bunch of people on one side saying stuff, the sort of the woke ultra liberals, and then they wind up the people on the right, and so the right go further right, so the liberals get more outraged, so they go further to the other side, and you never end up having a sensible conversation.
But see what it is that's not that many people. See, this is the craziness. They have all the time, and they're online talking and posting, and everybody in the media follows all this, and then they sort of get this impression of what the real world is on social media. And one thing I'm sure, because in the last year I've kind of quit social media, and so like, one thing I'm sure of is the real world is not represented at all in any accurate form online. You understand what I'm saying?
So how's he got the power? So I kind of agree with that. And yet there's real world power here, because if Musk plays to the very online people who aren't normal people, and yet he can get Trump elected, and yet he's dominating the news agenda in this country. This country is obsessed with Elon Musk's opinions, often based on a limited understanding of how Britain works, about Britain. And he's going to affect the British democratic system. How can those two things both be true? That there's a very online world, which is not the real world. That's right. And yet the real world seems to be incredibly influenced by it.
100%. And part of that is from the traditional media, then amplifying the views of social media, which are inaccurate, and then social media attacking traditional media, saying it's all false because they're trying to actually report news. So one of the real crimes of the last several years is the fact that all traditional media has now been tarred as false or fake news. And so what is truth is now whatever is repeated the most.
And Musk doesn't care about truth. Musk cares about...
There is no truth. It's what you repeat the most. This is the Trump thing. So if you want to know how it works, the way it is what is true is what you say the most. And so if you just keep saying it, it's true. And so if they say that a bunch of immigrants bombed New Orleans and we got to stop immigration, people just believe that's true, even though the guy was in the U.S. Army, okay, and was a U.S. citizen, born and raised here. But the stories online started with it's an immigrant, it's an illegal immigrant who just came here and by the time they get to the real story, it's like, maybe it's only 2 or 3 hours later, but all these people's opinions are somehow just formed. And so, it's a really challenging time for people to get good information. And that's one of the reasons I'm very popular on social media, is because I just put out information about like investing in EVs, for example. Like I was looking at the Cybercab and I post a bunch of stuff and people don't like some of the stuff I'm saying, but my vision of the future isn't a lot of people going around in these weird gold Cybercabs. I just don't see that vision. And they go, what do you know? You're not Elon. And I said, well, I knew enough to invest in Elon before you did. And so,
would you invest in him now, Ross? Is Musk?
Well, I am. Unfortunately for me, I'm invested in X and XAI and Tesla still. In investing, and I certainly would invest in Elon Musk, and I invest in several other CEOs that I don't agree with as well. So I want to say that if you're in the business world like mine, many of the people I invest with, I don't necessarily agree with.
But he's still a good bet.
Investing is about making money, and Elon has made a lot of money, not only for me and for my clients, but I think he's an unstoppable force in business. I'll give him that for sure. So like when you go and you look at what's happening at Apple and how lazy they are, it's the most lazy environment, like at Google, and then you go over to Tesla. I mean, so it's I'm not trying to take away what Elon's accomplished as a business person. And he's inspired me dramatically in my own business, in my own, like I've learned a lot from that. So I want to separate. I have my personal opinions and I have my political opinions and I have, my online opinions, which I minimize now. But, from a business perspective, I'm in the business of making money and I'm going to invest with people who are going to make me money. And Elon's a guy that's going to make you money.
So just finally, before you go, Ross, he's a good bet. Is he a danger? Is he a danger to the world?
No, not in the sense of ultimately, I don't think Elon is a character like a Hitler or something where there's some real evil intent. I don't think that at all. I think he actually thinks he's doing good. It's a misguided issue. But what I really think is that he's battered around by his emotions. He has very fundamental emotional problems from being an abused child. And, if you read the book, the first couple chapters about his life are horrendous, And so, I want to separate you might not like a lot of things he's pushing, but I don't think it's meant under the guise of evil. I think it's just a misguided viewpoint, especially anti-gay, anti-immigration, because he personally is that. And so I think that's part of it. People have to understand the psychology behind Elon. He's dealing with his own personal demons. Just the world has to deal with this.
And we're now dealing with them as well. That's such a good way of putting it. Ross, it's been fascinating speaking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.